I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Renee Riddle. You'll notice that the slide on the screen is depicting some sort of an athletic event, and that is to create a contrast in your mind. Because Renee Riddle is not much of an athlete these days. One time she was a very active scholar athlete on the high school level, did great athletically and academically, but the summer between her last year in high school and first year in college, she's in a bit of a hurry to get from one activity to another, probably more of a hurry than she should have been. She loses control of the vehicle she's driving. It leaves the highway at high rates of speed. In a matter of a few tragic seconds, Renee Riddle's body is dramatically altered. She has a spinal injury at the 11th thoracic vertebra, meaning about mid-abdomen. She said, immediately it felt like my entire body was just a volcano of flames and pain. She says, I passed out. And if you know something about usual medical procedures, because that pain will endure for several days, they usually medicate the spinal injuries with a heavy sedation. And that was the case with Renee Riddle. For 4 or 5 days, she knows she's hurt. She knows she's hurt very badly. To what extent, how permanently, she doesn't know. But there's no communication, no information about that, as she's just in a drug-induced coma for that period of time. Now, she has a great support system, wonderful supportive parents, but there was not any communication even with them. So now if you'll picture that it's 4 days post-accident, and Renee is coming out of the medication. And she can forego that now long enough to have a conversation with somebody, and picturing now that it happened to be her father's turn to be sitting by the bed. If you have that all pictured in your mind, you won't have much trouble at that point picturing a fairly poignant conversation between a father and a once very athletic daughter that she will spend the rest of her life in a mechanized chair. Now, I've had multiple conversations with Renee Riddle over the years. Some of them amounted to interviews practically. And she's a very inspiring person to me, as you probably already surmise. That's why I'm bringing her into the conversation here right at the outset. She has gone forward in such a vigorous, courageous, effective manner that I've wanted to learn more about it. I can tell you that in the conversations I've had with her, I don't even remember one of those where I didn't walk away from that conversation with my proverbial batteries charged up, with a greater commitment to get on with reaching my goals, not worry so much about what was missing or what was hard or what was not connected the way I'd like it to be connected, and to really get after it. And I know I'm not the only one that's inspired by Renee's life. Now, the question that probably all of us would want to ask at some point is the one I'm referring to here. And the question simply was, Renee, go back to that moment of stark reality when the fact was staring you in the face that for the rest of your life you are going to be a paraplegic. I'd like to know what went through your mind. I'd like to know your decisions. And her answers meant a lot to me then, and I tell you that they continue to grow in their value. I think about her answer with some frequency. It helps me keep my thoughts on some more powerful planes. And her first answer was essentially this. She said, some way, somehow, at that moment, I really understood that I was in the position of choice. She said, I saw that I could immediately create a great case for self-pity. I could choose to feel sorry for myself, never quite accept the conditions, kind of whine and pine my way along in life. She said, I saw I could choose to be bitter and upset. I could be furious with God, upset with the universe. I'm only 18 years old. This isn't fair. But the more I thought about those choices and then the repercussions that would come from them, she said, I immediately saw that either one of those would only increase the damage that the accident had done to my life. And right then and there, she said, I decided that I was going to accept these conditions and then go forward in the most positive terms to be the most productive human being I could be. At that point, she said, I got another insight. She said, as I made that decision, there was a vivid realization that struck my mind. At that moment, I realized that my life hadn't changed. Just my body. Now, if you and I were going to write a book called The Greatest Understatements in the Universe, I think that just my body might well wind up on our first page. I can't think of anything that would just be constantly there in your thinking equation. I mean, every time you moved your body in a room, or you went from building to car, or vice versa, you'd always have those encumbrances, and your thoughts would be almost inclined to be saying, why do I have to be putting up with this? Why me? And yet Renee had seen something monumental. And I don't want us to just hit the surface of this and glance off of it. Renee had seen that she has a body, but she's not her body. She has emotions, but she's not her emotions. And she has feelings, but she's not her feelings. She's the selector of her thoughts and feelings. On this entire spectrum of human possibility about feelings and reactions, she gets to choose which of those she's actually going to take on and wear and project, or which one she's going to consider and set aside. And essentially, Renee had seen that she's the thinker of thoughts. She's the thinker of thoughts inside her body, and what that thinker of thoughts chooses to think has everything to say about the quality of life that she lives, the energy she brings to any adversity, even the way she interprets the word adversity is factored in that equation. And she said, at that point, she said, I realized that not even my goals in life had to change. Before the accident, I had 3 main goals. She said, number 1, I wanted to be well educated. She said, I aspired to a master's degree in speech pathology so that number 2, I could be an inspiration to hearing impaired children. And she said, at some point, I wanted to get married and have a child of my own. And just because my back had been fractured and I was paralyzed in a good part of my body, it didn't mean that I couldn't at least strive for my goals. As you already suspect, I'm standing in front of you today to say that Renee Riddle has done it all. And in my opinion, she's done it with flying colors. Took her more time, considerably more effort. But she got that bachelor's degree, she got that master's degree. She is a tremendous inspiration to hearing impaired children, and I tell you that from firsthand experience. I have a pretty inspiring 23-year-old son. At least to me, he's inspiring. He was born profoundly deaf. Our son Christian is one of the profoundly deaf of the profoundly deaf, and sometimes the mountain he has to climb seems a little taller than Everest. But every time he's had a conversation with somebody like a Renee Riddle, he walks away from that conversation with his batteries charged up. He knows he can do his version of what she's doing. She's now Renee Riddle Moore. And a few years ago, she gave birth to a perfectly healthy baby boy. And at that point, she said, I do not understand all this fretting and fuming about childbirth. I didn't feel a thing. Somebody told me her husband needed quite a bit of anesthetic to get through his part, however. Now,